Good morning, friends. We will begin with a peace chant. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Punaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavaditamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om, may Brahman protect us. May he guide us. May he give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So friends, today's topic is the eternal witness, the eternal subject, and it's based on the Svetasvatara Upanishad. You can purchase this Upanishad with different commentaries online to follow along. For many who are following the path of devotion, it may seem very dry, a very dry subject, and therefore it doesn't appeal to us. But no, even those of us who follow the path of devotion, it gives us strength. Because why? When we were children and we wanted to eat dessert, our mother would tell us, no, dear, eat your spinach first. That is what makes you strong. And in this case, the Vedanta philosophy is what makes us strong in whatever particular path we're following, whether the path of devotion, of karma yoga, of Raja yoga. Why? Because it's a philosophy based on revelation, not theology, not flimsy theology. And so it is all-inclusive. Those of us who are devotees, yes, we can follow it because we know it has the strength of the philosophical understanding of Advaita Vedanta. So in order to wrap ourselves around this subject more intimately, let us begin with a guided meditation that leads us into the subject. And the subject and the guided meditation is Swami Vivekananda's non-dual meditation given in his Jnana Yoga class. Excuse me as I grapple with the microphone here. So this came right from Vivekananda. And so let us close our eyes, sit straight in our chair or on the floor, in a full lotus, half lotus, however you are the most comfortable. And if you're in a chair with your feet firmly planted on the ground. In Swami Vivekananda's words, let him guide us. First, we begin our meditation by negation. Think away everything we are not. Analyze everything that comes in the mind by the sheer force of the action of the will. The body drinks, eats, and so on. I am not the body. I am not the mind. I am not thought. I am he. Next, Vivekananda tells us, assert what we really are. Existence, knowledge, and bliss. Being, knowing, and loving. Meditation is the means of unification of the subject and object. Therefore, meditate. Above, it is full of me. Below, it is full of me. In the middle, It is full of me. I am in all beings, and all beings are in me. Om Tat Sat. I am that. I am existence above mind. I am the one spirit of the universe. I am neither pleasure nor pain. I am He. I am the witness. I look on. When health comes, I am the witness. When disease comes, I am the witness. I am existence, knowledge, bliss. I am the essence and nectar of knowledge. Through eternity, I change not. I am calm, resplendent, and unchanging. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So friends, this meditation comes to us from Vivekananda himself, an Ishvarakoti, an ever-free soul. His affirmations make us sit up straight. He is feeding us the truth of who we really are. So this subject, the eternal witness, is about us. As a quick review, in our last talk, last week, we gave a little bit of the background of the Svetasvatara Upanishad. It's older than the 5th century BC. And like the Bhagavad Gita, it represents no particular point of view, but attempts to reconcile conflicting philosophical views of its period. So remember, this great Vedanta philosophy is a system of osmosis. It stood on the shoulders of Kapila and Patanjali and Shankara. And then with the advent of Ramakrishna, it rose to even greater, broader system of philosophy. This is the beauty of Vedanta. And this particular Upanishad is a synthesis of the Vedic, Puranic, Sankhya, and Yogic thought of the time it was being composed. And it harmonizes both jnana and bhakti. So we each can find a sliver of spinach within this wonderful Upanishad. Svetasvatara literally means he who has white mules. It was composed long before classical Sankhya philosophy existed, which was founded by Kapila, who was an illumined soul, a rishi. However, Sankhya terminology is found in this Upanishad because of Sankhya's interaction with other currents of Indian thought, and including Vedanta. So these words came to have multiple nuances and their meanings changed over time. For example, Purusha in this Upanishad can mean a person, or it is used interchangeably as the Atman, either in the individual or universal sense. And Prakriti appears once, but occurs 21 times in the Bhagavad Gita, yet it's celebrated as one of 3 cornerstones of Vedanta. So these terms, Maya and Prakriti, are sometimes used interchangeably, even though they belong to specific systems of thought. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali were compiled in the 2nd or 3rd centuries CE, but the sutra's systematic presentation is recognizable in the 2nd chapter of the Svetasvatara Upanishad. See? So diverse theories and practices of yoga developed over thousands of years in pre-Vedic, Vedic, Vedantic, and Proto-Sankhya references. And we find in this Upanishad references to Shaivism. These Shaiva elements can also be found in this Upanishad. And non-dual Kashmir Shaivism is considered non-Vedic by Shankara because it recognizes no dichotomy between Brahman and Maya. Shiva is a single consciousness at rest and active. Now, what about Maya? Well, Vedanta views Maya as separate from Brahman. But in Shaivism, it views Maya as Shiva's own self-assumed power of limitation by which he, the infinite one, experiences his creation through innumerable finite centers of consciousness, the individual jiva, us. What about moksha? How does that fit in? In Advaita Vedanta, moksha is arrived at through neti neti atma. The empirical universe vanishes altogether into the absolute oneness of Satchidananda. There is no object. But in Shaivism, the highest state is iti iti. The world does not vanish, but appears as nothing other than the singular divine consciousness. In our tradition, vijnana is a higher state of attainment, but the highest state is brahmajnana, or no objectivity. There's no objectivity. But those who come down from brahmajnana then again can rise to the state of vijnana, to live and move in this world of consciousness. Shankara's Advaita Vedanta commentary has claim over the Svetasvatara Upanishad, though the commentary bearing his name is considered by some scholars to be the work of another. So you see how elusive this is. Nothing was pinned down, stamped down. It was a very fluid interaction of many different systems of thought, currents of thought at that time in ancient India. So now we begin. We talked in the first in the series on verses 1 through 4. In the first verse, I read, the sage Svetasvatara said, seekers of the highest knowledge ask, what is the cause of this universe? Is it Brahman? From what are we born? By what do we live? In what is our impermanence? O knowers of Brahman, what law governs us? Whose lives run their course through happiness and all the rest? Now, some of you may have asked one or several of these questions, but there comes a time in our life when we want to know the meaning of life. We want to have something more than theology. And so Vedanta gives us that. The accepted worldview is based on the realization in the Chandogya Upanishad. In chapter 3, section 14, verse 1. All this universe is truly Brahman. Sarvam kalvidam Brahma. From that all things originate, and that they dissolve. By that they are sustained in tranquility. One should meditate on that. One scholar, Devadatta Kali, points out the highest thought on which the human mind can be fixed is that of a being, which is the cause, the goal, and the support of the universe. And that is Brahman, the eternal subject, apart from which the universe has no existence. Verse 2, quick review. Should time, nature, design, or chance, the elements, energy, or intelligence, be regarded as a cause of this universe? Well, the commentary eliminates all these 7 possible causes. Why? Because it's impossible to discover the final cause of the universe by means of reason based on sense experience. Through yoga, the seers concluded the Supreme Lord evolved the world with the help of his own Maya. Verse 3, again, this is review. The Upanishad states, deep within all beings, he dwells, hidden from sight by the coverings of the gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. He presides over time, space, and all apparent causes. And the commentary reminds us, the first point, deep within all beings, he dwells. And all that means. We must experience the truth for ourselves, and we can. Swami Prabhavananda's commentary explains, as we enter the temple of the body and become absorbed in consciousness of God, everything else disappears from our consciousness, and what remains is the ocean of existence, the ocean of knowledge, the ocean of bliss. And the Swami was speaking from his own experience. This world disappears. Why, we ask? Because time and space exist in the mind. And what is mind? Subtle matter. We can experience our thoughts. We can perceive our feelings, our memories, our emotions. That which we can experience is impermanent. It's material. So what does that mean? We transcend body, mind, senses, all limitations of body consciousness, all fluctuations, moods of the mind, sense attractions. We transcend the 3 gunas, the energy, the forces that create this world, this physical and mental universe. Sattva, which is tranquility and light, rajas, activity, tamas, inertia. The second point, he presides over time, space, and all apparent causes. When we become absorbed in the Atman, the mind dissolves in the ocean of consciousness. And that eliminates time, space, and causation. The universe disappears and Brahman alone remains. And in this verse, Svetasvatara answers his own question. Is Brahman the cause of this universe? He says, he, Brahman, presides over time, space, and causation, all apparent causes. But then why create this Maya, we might ask? Why? When Sri Ramakrishna was asked why God puts us into this world, he simply explained, to perpetuate his creation. It is his will, his Maya. Or in other words, his divine play. And so now we begin with verse 4. This vast universe is a wheel. Svetasvatara is giving us a metaphor. Upon it all are all creatures that are subject to birth, death, and rebirth. Round and round it turns and never stops. It is the wheel of Brahman. Now the commentary. We need examples, metaphors, parables, so that our mind can hook onto something so vast, so beyond the mind. We want to intuit what this Brahman is and what this Maya is. Maya, in its causal state, is a circumference of the wheel's rim, Svetasvatara is telling us, which defines its own limiting power. Whenever you have a boundary, you have a limitation. Hidden by the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, encircling bands or hoops, strands of energy from which manifest universe is woven. And there are 16 components, knowledge and action, aided by the outer world and 5 elements, fire, water, earth, air, space. And knowledge comes through the senses, the mind, plus the 5 organs of perception, hearing, touch, sight, taste, smell. And action manifests through the 5 organs of action, our speech, our hands, feet, evacuation, and generation, and on and on. The main point is the binding wheel to the axle, the leather straps. Those are the desires which keep the soul bound to worldly existence. And when the infinite consciousness identifies itself with some or all of these finite projections listed, we experience ourselves as individual beings. It's just inborn. It's not our fault. It's our condition. We feel we are the doer, so we are bound by the law of karma. Every time we can surrender our actions, we are unbinding ourselves. So says Karma Yoga. When we realize our identity with Brahman, we no longer identify ourselves with this mere body, this mind, which are changeable. So there's freedom. We are identified with the unchangeable reality. Thus, we transcend the illusion of time. We transcend coming and going, birth, death, and rebirth. What does that mean? Literally, we altogether transcend the body idea. In 1886, after Sri Ramakrishna exposed Naran, the future Vivekananda, to Advaita Vedanta, which he resisted at the very beginning, but then gradually he began to understand and accept. And he was convinced of its truth. Naran began to yearn and pray for that experience, to lose the small I in true being beyond thought. Naran hungered to realize the central truth of the Upanishads. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. One evening, it came unexpectedly. Naran was meditating when suddenly he felt a light at the back of his head, as though a torchlight were playing there. It became more and more brilliant and larger and larger. Finally, it seemed to burst. His mind became merged in it. What transpired then in his consciousness was beyond words, for that absolute state is beyond description. Sometime after this realization, he wrote some verses in the Hymn of Samadhi, a beautiful poem, which hint at the nature of that exalted state. All was still and quiet in the room where Naran and Gopal Sr. were, Swami Advaitananda, the future Swami Advaitananda, where they were both meditating. Then suddenly Gopal heard Naran cry out, Gopalda, Gopalda, where is my body? And coming down from that state Narayan was at first conscious only of his head. His body seemed lost. So vast was that state of consciousness. It was a struggle to bring it down. Only the head began to come into view. Why, Narayan? There it is. It's there, answered the startled Gopal as he looked at Narayan's rigid body, lying prostrate straight. He then hastened for help from Sri Ramakrishna, whom he found in a state of inner calm. This was at Kasipur. His countenance deeply serious, as though he knew what was happening in the next room, which of course he did. In reply to Gopal's entreaty, Sri Ramakrishna said, "Let him, Narayan, stay in that state for a while. He has teased me long enough for it." So this is what it means to lose our sense of body and mind. We transcend it. We become so vast and universal. Sri Ramakrishna describes for us what happens after transcendence. He says, a jnani sees everything at once. God, Maya, the universe, and its living beings. He sees that Vidya Maya, knowledge, avidya Maya, ignorance, the universe and all living beings exist and at the same time do not exist. Seems paradoxical. Exist, but do not exist. In other words, the jnani sees the world as what it is, an appearance. He sees through it. Sri Ramakrishna said, as long as he is conscious of I, he is conscious of others too. And there's a little bit of I consciousness when the jnani comes down to the normal state of consciousness. Nothing whatsoever exists after he cuts through the whole thing with that sword of jnana. Then even his I becomes as unreal as the magic of the magician. The beautiful story connected with Swami Ritajananda, who was the former head of the Gretz Center. He was a disciple of Swami Shivananda. One of our nuns visited him, I believe in the 60s or 70s. She was young, and she thought he was nice enough, but there was nothing very special about him. He was sweet, but, almost innocuous. And then later, when she went back, he was an altogether changed person. And she found out from a doctor there that at one point his heart stopped and they thought they had lost him. And then magically almost, he came back to normal consciousness and was changed. When our nun asked the Swami, what's happened? You're altogether different. His simple reply was, Sri Ramakrishna was gracious. What he had experienced is called kumbhaka. When the knowledge comes, the heart stops. One goes into the experience of union. So in truth, Maya cannot exist without Brahman, but Brahman can exist without Maya. Verse 5. Or they said, we think of him as a river, yet another metaphor, beautiful metaphor, with 5 currents. Its sharp bends are the 5 elements, its waves are the 5 vital forces, and its origin is the mind, the source of the 5-fold perception. It has 5 whirlpools, and its tumbling rapids are the 5 kinds of misery. Flowing around 5 obstructions, it takes on countless aspects. So let's find out what Svetasvatara is telling us. He's giving us another way to think of Brahman through the imagery of a river. The ancient rishis were captivated by, and they also deified, the Saraswati River, not only as a holy river, but as the personified goddess, Saraswati. And further, the Saraswati River came to be recognized as the shining stream of consciousness, a symbol of Brahman. But why symbolize Brahman as a river, we might ask? Because a river is always different, yet ever the same. Always different, but ever the same. The imagery of a dynamic flow of water along a determined course, one commentator explains, reflects that the universe too is a spontaneous flow of constant change within an unchanging unity. As water evaporates from the sea, falls as rain, and flows back into the sea, the creation emanates from and returns to Brahman, taking on and then relinquishing countless forms and qualities along the way. So let's break down this river metaphor of Brahman. With the river of consciousness, its water flows in 5 currents. What are those 5 currents? Our 5 sensory faculties: sight, taste, smell, touch, hearing. The river's sharp bends are 5 elementary materials of the universe: space, air, fire, water, earth. Its waves, the 5 organs of action. Its fountainhead, the mind, the source of the 5 sensory perceptions. A commentator explains, the river of shining consciousness did not always flow smoothly. Neither does the human experience that it represents. And don't we know that? So this river imagery is so apt. Its 5 whirlpools are the objects of senses. Its rapids are the 5-fold miseries: resting in the womb, birth, old age, illness, death. 5 pain-bearing obstructions are ignorance and all that comes after it: egoism, attachment, aversion, clinging to life. The 5 pain-bearing obstructions: avidya, ignorance. It's the misconception of who I am, which is the root cause of all following obstructions. Egoism, asmita, the claim that I am I, the initial act that produces the chain reaction of further superimposition and entanglement. Individuality for myself implies individuality everywhere. Thus, it automatically superimposes a world of multiplicity upon the one undivided reality. Raga, attachment, repeated desire stimulated by memory to experience enjoyment. It becomes stored in the memory and again until it becomes a deep-rooted samskara. Every time we enjoy, it's implanted in the memory and we want to repeat that enjoyment. Dvesha, aversion. The memory of it, of our hatred, our aversion, causes pain and stimulates our attachment to that experience. Why? We all know. When somebody insults us, we remember again and again and again the insult. And it causes us pain. Abhinivesha, inertia, that forces us to stick to this world, the love of this mundane way of life, clinging to the status quo of avidya, ignorance, thinking everyone will die, but I will not. I will never die. No, Nothing is permanent in this world. Verse 6. As long as the individual self thinks it is separate from Brahman, it revolves upon the wheel in bondage to the laws of birth, death, and rebirth. But when through the grace of Brahman, it realizes its identity with him, it revolves upon the wheel no longer, it achieves immortality. So we see this imagery of the individual soul revolving upon the wheel of birth, death, rebirth. Now there's another image, the Hamsa, the white swan. In Vedic times, it symbolized the individual soul, its long migratory flight symbolizing transmigration, or the universal spirit of Brahman. Its whiteness, the pure, indwelling spirit. It symbolizes discrimination. Its beak is believed to separate milk from water. How to separate the Atman, our true nature, from the non-Atman? In the Ashtavakra Samhita, verse 11, whatever you think you are, you become. He who thinks himself free is free, and he who thinks he is bound is bound. That is the simple, straightforward practice. Vivekananda tells us, the theory of the Vedanta therefore comes to this, that you and I and everything in the universe are that absolute, not parts, but the whole. Mark these words, not the parts, but the whole. You are the whole of that absolute, and so are all others, because the idea of part cannot come into it. These divisions, these limitations are only apparent, not in the thing itself. I am complete and perfect, and I was never bound, boldly preaches the Vedanta. If you think you are bound, bound you will remain. If you know that you are free, free you are. Thus, the end and aim of this philosophy is to let us know that we have been free always and shall remain free forever. This is such a radical philosophy. You are not a part of the infinite reality. You are the whole of the infinite reality. Verse 7. He who is realized by transcending the world of cause and effect in deep contemplation is expressly declared by the scriptures to be the supreme Brahman. He is the substance, all else is shadow. He is imperishable. The knowers of Brahman know him as the one reality behind all that seems. For this reason, they are devoted to him. Absorbed in him, they attain freedom from the wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. Let's try to deconstruct this. What is liberation? It's the misconception that we are dewdrops that merge into the ocean of Brahman. Now, we once thought that that was okay, but no. Swami Prabhupada explains, no, behind every one is that infinite ocean of existence, infinite ocean of knowledge and bliss. We recognize that. We realize that. We experience that. You see, this is not philosophy based on theology. This is philosophy based on realization. experience. How to realize that Atman. Sri Ramakrishna says, the nectar of Satchidananda is the nectar of immortality. Man does not die from dying into it. Dive deep. By diving deep in God, one becomes immortal. Swami Prabhavananda's commentary, he says, go within. That means to meditate, to concentrate, to contemplate. That's our practice. It also means to pray, because prayers are not answered outside. From where then are they answered? Swami Vivekananda tells us, he is nearer to us than even our senses, nearer to us than our own thoughts. It is in and through him that we see and think. To see anything, I must first see him. To see this wall, I first see him and then the wall, for he is the eternal subject. Who is seeing whom? He is here in the heart of our hearts. I am, Vivekananda continues, is eternal, unchangeable. In him and through him, we know everything. In him and through him, we see everything. In him and through him, we sense, we think, we live, we are. And that I, which we mistake to be the little I, limited, is not only my I, but yours, the I of everyone, of the animals, of the angels, of the lowest of the low. That I am is the same in the murderer as in the saint, the same in the rich as in the poor, the same in man as in woman, the same in man as in animals. I am existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. I am the blissful one. I am the blissful one. This, says the Vedanta, is the only prayer that we should have. This is the only way to reach the goal, to tell ourselves and to tell everybody else that we are divine. To quickly recap, then, he is nearer to us than our own thoughts. Imagine this. Try to imagine this. He is nearer than the nearest. He is the I am. And we must begin by trying to remember the simple truth. I am. I exist. And I know that I am. Strip everything else away. And that I is not only my I, but the I of every being. That existence. Vivekananda tells us this is the only prayer we should have. The assertion of our own divinity, pure existence, which is pure consciousness, which is pure bliss. So where do we start? Our teachers tell us, practice, practice, practice. How to practice? We must first show an interest in our goal. We must first desire God. In order to become interested, we must learn how to assert our discriminative faculty and learn how to practice discrimination. We learn by doing. We learn to swim by being thrown in the water. And we start dog paddling. Impress upon the mind the joy of holy company and the satisfaction gained from regular meditation and the importance of spiritual self-development. Without that, life is insipid. Without improving and raising ourselves, what are we? Just enjoying senses and sense objects. So with daily practice, interest grows. And with long continued practice, our goal is reached. This interest grows with concentration of mind. You feel you're gaining something solid. And without meditation, you feel you've lost your anchor. That is a sign of spiritual progress. Then we begin to taste our love for God, and our meditation deepens. And those moments remain with us. We know beyond doubt that the gold mind is indeed within. Swami Brahmananda tells us, behind this mind of ours, there is a subtle spiritual mind existing in seed form. Through the practice of contemplation, prayer, and japam, this mind is developed. And with this development, a new vision opens up, and the aspirant realizes many spiritual truths. This, however, is not the final experience. Having reached this stage, the world no longer holds any charm for the aspirant. He becomes absorbed in the consciousness of God. We become a blessing to ourselves and to others. And the truth is, the light, and that shines in our consciousness. The knowers of Brahman know him as the one reality behind all that seems. Jesus affirmed this. And in Matthew 6:21, he said, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Verse 8. The Lord supports this universe, which is made up of the perishable and the imperishable, the manifest and the unmanifest. The individual soul, forgetful of the Lord, attaches itself to pleasure and thus is bound. When it comes to the Lord, it is free from all fetters. Now, what does this mean? The Absolute is the sole support of all that is momentary and all that is enduring, all that we perceive and all that we perceive not. What is creation? For the first time in this Upanishad, Svetasvatara speaks of the divine reality as Isha, the root Ish, to command, to rule, to reign. And it's a distinctly Kashmir Shaivism term. From this divine standpoint, the Lord views the world as his sovereignty. See, this is Kashmir Shaiva elements. In the Chandogya Upanishad, chapter 6, section 2, verses 1 through 3, it states, Brahman, one without a second, thought, may I be many, may I grow forth. Aikshata means saw in the mind or beheld. Now Shankara, great Vedanta teacher Shankara, concludes that Parameshvara, the highest Lord, abiding in the self of all, produced the manifold creation by his power of thought. We're using very sort of gross terms to describe creation. It's not thought as we know it to be. Oneness of consciousness is the only possible source of creation. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, chapter 2, section 6, verse 1, he, the supreme being, desired, may I be many, may I go forth. Brahman first willed, then performed austerity, meaning deliberated, and then emitted all this, idam sarvam. Shankara's commentary, Brahman willed, thought, and created. Now this resembles elements of Kashmir Shaivism. Shiva's powers of will, icha, knowledge, jnana, and action, kriya. So now let's take a deeper look at the theory of creation. Vedanta versus Kashmir Shaivism. Vedanta acknowledges cosmic emanation takes place through the power of Maya, Brahman's inscrutable power of avidya shakti, the veiling power of ignorance. Maya, what is this? Maya is neither wholly real nor wholly unreal. It is dependent on Brahman and inseparable from it, just as the power to burn is inseparable from fire. Devadatta Kali, one commentator, explains, Brahman ever rests in its own perfection as absolute being, consciousness, bliss, and does not actively create. Instead, Advaita Vedanta teaches that the apparent world, with all its objects and individual souls, is superimposed upon Brahman through this mysterious power of Maya. Now in Kashmir Shaivism, the universe became manifest when the absolute, Paramashiva, freely engages in sport of self-limitation through his power of Maya. Creation is not a superimposition on reality, but the absolute's own self-projection. In Advaita Vedanta, we take the illustration of the snake and the rope. And it's very important to go back to that to remind us how this happens, how we're deluded. Due to the darkness, we're traveling along a road, walking along a road at dusk, we mistake a rope for a snake. So also this whole universe, this universe snake, is superimposed upon Brahman, the rope. In jnana, in samadhi, this universe vanishes. And when the jnani returns to normal consciousness, he or she knows beyond doubt this universe is a dream and negates all perceived forms. Sri Ramakrishna says, now what does that do for us as followers of the path of bhakti? So Sri Ramakrishna explains, it is good to meditate on an incarnation, God born as man. But how would a jnani view this? Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, God in man, inside the incarnation. And he explains that the Brahmajnani may even see the body of a divine incarnation as a glass case or as a lantern with a light burning inside, but knows the glass case, the body, is a mere covering, but in which one sees precious things, as he says. But this is not idol worship. We're not meditating on a form. We're meditating on that which the form represents. And in Sri Ramakrishna's case, all of the divine realms through which he traveled and lived. 6 months in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. By meditating on that form, it is possible to have the highest experience, because that is what the glass case is holding within. So as Vedantins, we negate the snake and affirm the rope. But outwardly and inwardly, Swami Vivekananda, both outwardly and inwardly, Swami Vivekananda affirms, Tatvamasi, that thou art. All these various ideas that I am a man or a woman, or sick or healthy or strong or weak, or that I hate or I love or I have a little power, are but hallucinations. Away with them. What makes you weak? What makes you fear? You are the one being in the universe. Stand up then and be free. Or, if we don't prefer the affirmation, let us turn to meditation. In meditation, we know the outer form of God allows our mind to hook onto God. But as concentration and meditation deepen, the form dissolves and its mystery is revealed as the Supreme Being. Swami Brahmananda beautifully explains this expansion of consciousness. He said in the Eternal Companion, as you meditate on your chosen ideal, think of him as bright and effulgent, and that everything shines because of his light. Think of him as living and conscious. As you continue thus, the form of your chosen ideal will gradually melt into the formless, into the infinite. Then will follow a vivid sense of the living presence, until finally the eye of wisdom will open and the infinite will be directly perceived. Ah, that is another realm, far beyond this universe. After this experience, the universe appears as nothing. The mind is dissolved and you experience Savikalpa Samadhi. This leads gradually to the realization of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, absolute union with God. This experience is beyond all thought and speech. There is nothing to be seen, nothing to be heard. All is infinite silence. It is beyond duality and non-duality. Now, I would like to end this talk with another guided meditation. We've been communing with the Absolute through words, and now let us try to commune through feeling. And we do this by following in Vedanta the I am. It is a trail that leads us to the pure consciousness within ourselves. The I am, this trying to hook our mind around that experience that I exist, I am, is the intuition of the individual consciousness of the self. And it's a manifestation of Sat Swarup. But this manifestation means there is still some ignorance associated with it. But by holding on to the I am, that leads us back to pure consciousness. But by the time we reach pure consciousness, there is no more sense of I am. What the I am was pointing at remains, but it is silent. The sense of I am disappears when there is no longer objectivity to oppose it. The I disappears into the self. So let us follow together this meditation of I amness. We begin by sitting with eyes closed. If you're in a chair with your feet firmly on the ground and your hands held in your lap, like Vivekananda has his hands held. Let us sit with eyes closed or half closed, and to calm the mind and center it, let's breathe in deeply and exhale completely 3 times. I am. The first perception before we experience anything else. The first perception when we wake up in the morning, then start defining ourself, is I am. But like a fish in water, which doesn't know what water is, it has nothing to contrast with water. Or like wearing glasses for a long time, we forget we're wearing them. And we're seeing everything else after we see through our glasses. We also are not aware of our amness. But it is the primary fact of our experience. Everything else is secondary. Now try to feel the pure sense of I am. Focus on the sense of I am, not repeating it like a mantra, but try to feel the bare fact that I am. Not a man or a woman, not young or old, smart or stupid, good or bad. Just I am. It's hard to keep the mind steady, so try to focus on the presence of the body, not as I am, but as an anchor to keep the mind in the here and now. And along with that, try to feel the presence of I am pervading the body and everything around it. The simple sense of our own existence is the background behind everything we perceive. Focus on the simple felt presence of your own self-existence, not to define it, not to look for a thing, but feel simply, I am. And as you do this practice, you will feel a sense of eternity, timelessness, about the sense of I am. You will feel time as something added on top of the sense of I am. You will feel I am endures behind and prior to time itself. There is something eternal about the self, not subject to time, not subject to waves of experience in the world. You will feel something tranquil, joyful, sacred. As we become aware that I am, we will experience joy, the joy about existence. And joy springs this universe, and joy dwells this universe, and joy dissolves this universe. You will reach a point that everything you perceive is within the sense, within the experience of I am. Your own self-existence is the background of everything you perceive. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace.